They left her hanging between two trees at the edge of the canyon where the wind screamed louder than mercy. Her wrists tied with rope so tight the bark bit into her skin, her boots barely touching the dirt, her breath coming in broken gasps as the men laughed below her, drunk on cruelty and dust and the belief that no one would come, because no one ever did out here. Not for girls like her, not for women who spoke back, not for those who were alone. The sun burned low and red, painting the sky the color of blood as one of the men stepped forward, tipping his hat and telling her this was the last lesson she'd ever learn, that the desert swallowed screams and secrets alike. And just as the rope creaked and her vision blurred, a sound cut through the laughter like a blade, hooves, steady and unafraid, coming closer instead of running away. A lone cowboy rode out of the dust, long coat snapping in the wind, eyes hidden beneath the brim of his hat, his horse stopping with a calm that didn't match the tension coiling in the air. He took in the scene without a word, the ropes, the bruises, the fear shaking her body, the men who thought they owned the world because they'd never been challenged. One of them scoffed and told him to keep riding unless he wanted trouble, and that was when the cowboy finally spoke, his voice low, even, carrying the weight of a promise rather than a threat. He said, "Touch her again." "And die." The laughter faltered. Hands drifted toward guns. The wind held its breath. In the space of a heartbeat, the cowboy moved, not fast, not wild, but precise, as if this moment had been waiting for him all his life. The first shot cracked like thunder, dust exploding near a man's feet, close enough to warn, far enough to show control. He told them to cut her down, slowly, carefully, and something in his eyes made them listen. As the rope loosened and her boots hit the ground, she collapsed and the cowboy was there, steadying her, his hand firm but gentle, telling her she was safe now, though his eyes never left the men who had learned too late that the desert does not belong to monsters. It remembers them. And as sirens echoed faintly in the distance, drawn by gunfire and fate, the cowboy mounted his horse again, tipping his hat once before riding back into the dust, leaving behind silence, justice, and a story the canyon would never forget. If stories like this move you, protect the helpless. And remind you that courage still rides into dark places. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because more powerful stories are coming. They said she never spoke for a long time after that night. Only watched the horizon, as if expecting the dust to rise again. As if the sound of hooves might return. Because the kind of fear that tightens around your throat doesn't disappear when the rope is cut. It lingers, it whispers, it tests whether hope was real or just another lie. But slowly, breath by breath, she began to live again, and word spread across the badlands of a cowboy who appeared when death thought it had already won. Some said he was a ghost. Others said a former lawman who stopped, believing in badges but never stopped, believing in justice. And wherever cruelty gathered like vultures, he seemed to ride straight through it, leaving broken chains and broken men behind. The men who tried to kill her were tried by law, but it was fear that truly imprisoned them, because every shadow looked like a rider. Every wind sounded like hooves, and the desert does not let guilt sleep. Years later, when she stood stronger than she ever thought possible, she returned to the canyon, not to remember pain, but to reclaim it, cutting the scarred rope from the tree and letting it fall into the dirt, a symbol that she was no longer hanging between fear and death. Somewhere far away, a cowboy rode on, unaware of the lives he'd changed, or perhaps knowing exactly and carrying it quietly, because real heroes don't wait for thanks. They just answer when darkness calls. And that is why these stories matter, because they remind us that even in the loneliest places, courage can arrive unannounced. That evil can be stopped by a single voice willing to say no more. And that hope sometimes comes on horseback. If you believe in stories where justice still rides, where the innocent are not forgotten, and where one brave soul can change everything, subscribe to the channel now, like the video, and stay with us, because the next story may be even more powerful. Years passed, but the desert never forgot. It remembered the way fear once screamed between two trees, and the way silence fell when justice rode in. Towns grew, roads cut through old land, and people pretended the past had been buried deep enough. But evil has a habit of returning where it thinks courage has died. A new gang came to the Badlands, crueler, smarter, wearing badges they bought instead of earned. And they learned quickly that power is easiest to take when people are afraid. They burned farms, took women, and laughed while doing it, confident that legends were just stories told to children. They chose the wrong land to test that belief. She was no longer the broken girl they once left hanging. She ran a small school now, her back straight, her voice steady. But when she saw the smoke on the horizon and heard the screams echo again through the canyon, her hands trembled, not with fear but with memory. That night, she saddled a horse and rode to the place where it had all begun, standing between the same two trees beneath the same unforgiving sky. She didn't pray for mercy. She spoke his name into the wind, not loud, not desperate, just certain. And the desert listened. At dawn, the gang rode into the canyon, dragging another victim, confident and careless. That was when the sound came, slow hooves, steady, unmistakable. One rider, long coat, low hat, the same calm that turns monsters into cowards. The leader sneered, raising his gun, but his hand froze when the cowboy spoke. The voice hadn't changed. "Drop her," he said, as if ordering the sun to rise. When the leader laughed, the cowboy dismounted, every movement deliberate, eyes cold with the weight of all the people he hadn't reached in time. "Last warning," he said. The desert wind carried the words like a verdict. What followed wasn't chaos, it was judgment. Shots rang out, sharp and final. Ropes were cut. Chains hit the dirt. Men who thought themselves untouchable learned the price of cruelty. When the dust settled, the gang was gone, some fleeing, some face down in the dirt, all broken by the truth that legends are born because someone once stood when everyone else knelt. The cowboy helped the girl to her feet, then turned to the woman who had once been the victim. He tipped his hat to her, not as a savior to the saved, but as an equal to someone who had survived. She asked him if he would stay this time. He looked at the horizon, where darkness always waits, and said, "As long as they need me." Then he mounted his horse and rode away once more, becoming dust, wind, and warning. But this time the people didn't stay silent. They rebuilt. They stood together. And when cruelty came again, it found not fear but fire. That's how the story truly ends. Not with a gunshot, but with courage spreading from one soul to many. If this story stirred something in you, if you believe, justice should never be silent and courage should never ride alone. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and